Hi, everybody. Welcome to the SONA Foundation and our Fireside Chat Therapy 101. It's our kickoff Fireside Chat for 2024, and we're really excited to be here today with Backline.care, again, our partner in this program. First, I want to welcome you to the SONA Foundation. We are the sister organization to Songwriters of North America, and they are doing great work out there in the world to support the industry of songwriters. But here at the foundation, we are very concerned with the songwriter as an individual. And so we are creating programs and resources for songwriters to support their mental health, their financial wellness, and their career development. And this, of course, is under our mental health initiative. This is our monthly Fireside Chat mental health conversations with songwriters. And today we have Backline.care talking Therapy 101, all of your questions about therapy. And I think this is going to be a really great one. So let me bring on Tara Lopez right now, right from Backline.care, community manager. Hi, Tara.
Hey, how's it going, Ariel?
Very good. Thank you so much for doing this once again.
Oh my gosh, this is seriously my highlight of the month. So very
Mine
excited.
too. Well, take it away. Go ahead. Introduce Backline and what are we doing today?
All right, so I'm Tara Lopez. I'm Backline's community manager and head of artist partnerships. And like Ariel mentioned, we have a very special and unique fireside chat with the SONA Foundation today. As most of you probably know, Backline is a resource hub for the music industry, and we aim to provide the industry with as many tools and resources as possible to support mental health and wellness. And we've teamed up with the SONA Foundation for this very special fireside chat to talk all about therapy, all your questions answered. What is therapy? How do you even go about finding a therapist? What to expect for your first session? What to bring? And also what to do if you're not vibing with your therapist, which I think is an important one. Our goal with this conversation is really just to provide tangible takeaways for you to help you assess whether or not therapy is for you. And if so, how can you start that process? We have a very special guest today, Amanda Wheeler. She's an associate psychotherapist and coach who leverages her entertainment industry experience to champion mental health advocacy within the music industry. She spent over a decade working at a top management company and with LA music venues, and has witnessed firsthand the industry's mental health challenges and those unique challenges. She specializes in supporting creatives by employing a culturally attuned relational approach and techniques, including CBT and DBT. And we're going to talk about those different therapies as well, those modalities. Amanda is also an active member of the Music Industry Therapist Collective. Ariel from the SONA Foundation is going to moderate the chat. So if you have any questions at any point, just please feel free to throw them in the chat there and we'll get to them. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk to Amanda today.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Yeah, no, I'm doing well. Just, yeah, it's like a kind of, the clouds are just breaking in LA. So it's good. It's a good day.
Well, I can't thank you enough for being here and for helping us kind of break down therapy. You know, for a lot of folks, I feel therapy can seem like this very overwhelming, looming subject. And we've had a lot of folks write in and send us questions about therapy. And so I'd love to just kind of dive in and hear your expertise.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, kind of what you had mentioned of I come from the music world. I worked in music industry for many years. It was actually working so closely with songwriters and artists that I did see, there was like a huge gap in resource for mental health care for musicians and songwriters. So with that, I kind of decided, I really want to gain the tools. Like I want to actually be able to help people in a really tangible way. Because, as an artist manager or even as an A&R person, oftentimes those roles, sometimes people get into these pseudo therapy roles of listening. And so I had done that for years and then decided, you know what, I really enjoy this and I really want to make a big difference. So I'm gonna, just pivot and do that. So it's been great. I've really enjoyed it. I can't
Oh my
say
gosh.
enough, but yeah.
Thank you, because we need more folks like you to help songwriters and creators within the mental health and wellness space. So let's dive into the first questions. A lot of folks just asked, how do you even know if you need therapy?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So, people come to therapy at all different types of the journey. Sometimes when you're actively in crisis and it's kind of like you're pushed to your breaking point, that's when people are like, you know what, I think I need to talk to somebody. But I actually would encourage, like it doesn't need to go even to that. Like therapy can be helpful much sooner than that. Like therapy isn't necessarily just, every therapist is different. There are a lot of different types of therapy too, which we'll get into. But it's not always just, somebody that's sitting there and listening to you. At least the way that I do therapy, it's very goal oriented, it's very active, and it's kind of starting to break apart the patterns that are going on, and how you're coping with things. Like, how is that coping style? How's that working? Is it healthy? Is it unhealthy? Starting to figure out that. So I always encourage people, if it's something that you're just like, you know what, something is not quite right, or I would really like to cope with my emotions in a better way, or, be able to, like just harness that energy in such a way. I think therapy can be great to just have somebody to bounce that off of and come up with goals and have that accountability too. That each week you're starting to realize like, oh yeah, did I work on myself this week? Did I, did I do the self-care that I knew I wanted to do? Or is it, what happens is like, oh no, we're in mid-January. How did we get here? And time just passes. So
I love that. I love that idea of using therapy as an accountability partner. I had never really thought about that, but that's like a fun way to think about it. So the next question is, we had actually quite a few questions that came in revolved around access to therapy. And as you know, navigating our healthcare system can be really tricky and really overwhelming. So I wanted to see if you might be able to help us break it down to help those watching understand the process, how maybe private health insurance or something like Coverage California, do they cover therapy? And if so, what does that look like? If not, do you have to pay out of pocket? If you have any, insight onto that in that aspect.
Yeah. So I feel like whenever I do consultation calls, I go into this extensively because I know that therapy is an expense and money is important. And, there are a lot of expenses in your life. So I am always like, okay, how do you make this work for you? I always encourage people there are different therapists. Some therapists do take insurance, and you can reach out to your insurance company, ask them, which do you have a network? I really wish that I could, when somebody calls me and they're like, I have Anthem Blue Cross, I could be like, I know exactly what they're going to cover. But unfortunately, there are so many tiny plans that there's just no way of me knowing. So I always encourage people, call your insurance company. They are going to be the ones that know the most. They know the therapist that it covers. And most importantly, is what out of network benefits you have. So a lot of people, I don't take insurance. There are a lot of therapists that don't take insurance, and that's, a whole nother discussion. But a lot of insurance policies will have out of network benefits. So for my clients that want to bill back to their insurance and have out of network benefits, I give them a super bill at the end of the month. And many therapists, this is not specific to me, there's many therapists that don't take insurance. They give you a super bill at the end of the month. You then submit that to your insurance. Your insurance will determine how much they will give you back. But have that conversation with your insurance company ahead of time. That way you know exactly what to expect. Outside of that, there are a couple of other resources, especially for the artist community, that I always encourage people to go to. Music Cares, they have excellent mental health services. They actually have, outside of just covering, they have stipends for mental health care. They also have stipends for, like if you need to go to a treatment center, stuff like that, they cover that. Sweet Relief is another one. They're excellent. It is just a couple of extra steps. It's like having an application. And then, yeah, Backline, you guys are amazing at connecting therapists to people and having all of those resources as well. But that's kind of what I tell people. For Covered California, that one, they have in-network. You have to speak with them, similar to other insurance companies, but speak with your, whatever the Covered California is, and they'll tell you what therapists are in network.
Okay, awesome. And we'll have all of this information listed on our website, Backline's website, but also the SONA Foundation. So if you're watching this, don't feel overwhelmed by all that. Like, we got you. So let's see. So, okay. So say you go through all of these avenues. How do you even go about like finding a therapist or knowing what to look for in a therapist?
Yeah. So there's a few different things. There's a lot of different resources, or, search engines is the wrong word, but places that you can go in order to find therapists. Backline, you guys are the best when it comes to knowing therapists that are going to work specifically with musicians, with artists, like all of that. And Backline, you guys actually vet those therapists ahead of time. So right. You guys will have, I've had those conversations with Backline, community managers being like, yes, I specialize in this. So knowing, I think, ahead of time, ahead of looking for a therapist, figuring out for yourself, what do I want to work on? Is that I'm feeling really depressed? Is that I'm having a lot of anxiety, performance anxiety, or just feeling overall nervous? Is that eating disorder? Is that substance use? There's so many different things. So I determine that first, then figure out, okay, where should I look? Backline's great. Music Industry Therapist Collective is excellent. Group of therapists from all over the world that work in music and are working as therapists. There's also Psychology Today that has filters. So there are a couple different places you can go. I always suggest do a consultation call. Mm-hmm. Make sure that you talk with that therapist, see how you vibe. It's really such a personal relationship. And if you don't get a good vibe, or you feel like, I don't want to tell this person things that are personal to me, then it is going to be not a good use of time for you. Like, it's going to be tough. It's another thing if that is just hard across the board. But if there's certain therapists that you really vibe with, that is one of the most important things. And then different therapists work in different ways. Some of them will only kind of focus on past and dive into those, like, family patterns and your mom and your dad and those relationships. How did that shape you? Some therapists will not ask that. They only want to know what's going on now and moving forward. So a lot of like just CBT, that's like focusing on your thoughts. How does that make you feel? And how does that behavior affect you? So I would ask all of those questions of, how do you work? What does therapy look like with you? All on the consultation call.
I love that. I love using the consultation call as kind of that first step to kind of see, like, is this going to be the right fit? Obviously, you won't really know until you're in the room or face-to-face in some capacity. But I do love using that as kind of the first gateway to kind of seeing like, all right, is this person right for me? So you kind of touched on CBT. I want to go a little bit more into that. So can you talk about the different types of therapy? There's talk therapy, obviously, CBT. You also specialize in DBT. Is that right?
Yeah.
Talk about those three.
Yeah. So yes, there are probably thousands of different types of therapy. I mean, there's even like equine therapy, which is like horses, like like doing stuff with horses, which it sounds amazing.
Yes.
But yeah, for what I do, unfortunately, I don't work with horses, but yeah, I specialize in, I mean, I kind of do a couple of different things. Like I am very systems oriented. So I will focus on your family system, your community, that system. How has that shaped you? Then from there, I use CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, to just start focusing on, okay, what are you telling yourself? What does that look like? Really focusing on those thoughts. And CBT, there is like both CBT and DBT, mindfulness is super important. And that it comes from focusing on, how am I feeling right now? Taking that pause and really deciding, okay, what's going on? How am I experiencing the world? What emotions are coming up for me? And how is this influencing my behavior? DBT is dialectical behavioral therapy. That dialectics is like two things can be right. It's a lot of challenging black and white thinking. If it's something like, well, I can all or nothing, there's no in between. It's really starting to be like, well, what if there was an in between, and what would that look like for you? And then on top of that too, there are a lot of different skills that come with DBT. It's emotional regulation, it's distress tolerance. There's just a lot of different things. I integrate a lot of these different modalities into the therapy that I do, because I understand that not everybody's the same and not everything is going to work for everybody. So I personally will be like, okay, is this working for you? Is it not? If it's not, that's cool. Let's figure out what does work for you. And kind of go about it in that way. There are therapists that only do CBT, and that would be like, all right, in and out, 12 sessions. Here we go. We're going to focus on this one thing, and then you're out. And not like in a cold way, but just like therapy's done. You're good to go. DBT as well. Like people that are certified in DBT, it's pretty extensive. It has groups that are integrated into it. There's a lot of coaching involved. So I kind of use these modalities as tools within my therapy.
Thank you so much for breaking all that down. I'm very excited to kind of dive in and check out DBT, especially for myself. So let's talk about, a lot of folks were wondering about like what to expect for their first therapy session. They went through the process, they had that consultation call, and now it's their first therapy session. What does that even look like?
Yeah. I mean, and I will preface, I think I've already said this, but every therapist is different. I can tell you what I do. But yeah, what to expect. I mean, I will say this, that therapy is a process. And so even going in with the expectation of that, you know what, it might not be that you are cured overnight in one session. I would love if I could do that. If I could just like be like, boom, no more anxiety, I would do it. But unfortunately, it is a process, and it's all about creating like new muscle memory. Oftentimes when, clients come in, it's like they've been thinking this way for a while. They've been acting this way for a while. So it's almost like, okay, if you've had this negative inner critic that has just been beating you down for years, it might take a minute to really start to replace those thoughts with positive ones. And it's not to say that it'll take forever or that it's not worth it. It absolutely is. But it's just like if you were to do bicep curls only on your left side forever, and then you go to lift a box, obviously your left arm is going to crush it. The right arm is going to struggle. So it's a process. The first session, it's like building a relationship. So it's laying a lot of the groundwork. It might not necessarily mean that you come out of that first session feeling great. You might, but it also might bring up a lot of things that are really uncomfortable to deal with. And that's okay. Like, having those feelings is okay. It's then figuring out, okay, what do I do with these feelings? Like, that's part of the, half the battle is identifying, what are those feelings? Like, why am I feeling this way? What am I feeling? Then diving into like, okay, how do you rework that? Like, how do you kind of, figure out new patterns that work for you? So yeah.
Are there any like special items that someone should bring? Like anything, a notebook or just any, anything that you would suggest?
Yeah. I mean, I would suggest it's helpful to have a notebook, even just to write things down. My memory's not great, so I love that. Some people, they're like, got it, locked it, don't need to worry. I need the reference. So having a notebook is awesome. I think also journaling can be amazing in externalizing things and identifying things. So it's great to have like a therapy notebook where you're just like, you could be writing down thoughts. You could be writing down, some therapists do like assignments. I definitely will do a like, all right, this week, I want you to work on this, or I want you to think on this. And then next week, let's talk about it. That way, that's the accountability piece of being like, okay, this isn't just this 1 hour, because I want to maximize, I know that you're paying money. So like, let's maximize this. Let's make it an all week thing. And just in this hour, we hash out stuff, start working on things, and figure out the plan for the next week. So yeah, I would say that. Some people find it can be really intense to look at somebody and be vulnerable and to be talking about feelings. So for some of those clients, it could be helpful to have some type of like putty. There's like therapy putties. There's like different things that you can bring that kind of can bring your attention into your body and out of your brain. And this is helpful too, just for anxiety in general. Like if you're really starting to feel like, whoa, my brain is just going a million miles, having something that's like tactile to really start to focus on for when you feel overwhelmed, being like, okay, I have this putty. It feels this way in between my fingers. Like it sounds a certain way. So that is just trying to get you more into your body and less into just your brain. So yeah, I would suggest those things.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah. And how often should folks go to therapy?
Yeah, I always suggest, and I know it can be tough, but weekly. If you do bi-weekly, not impossible, but you see the results at a slower pace. And I can see that gets frustrating to people. So I always suggest, even if it's, oftentimes it is a financial constraint, which I completely understand. So what I suggest to those people is like, do weekly first. Like do weekly as long as you can, and then drop down to the bi-weekly once you're feeling like, okay, I can really like connect the dots and be working on these things and be checking in every couple weeks. Because yeah, when you start off that way, it can feel a little bit like, okay, we're catching up on the last 2 weeks. Oh, and here's another tidbit. Cool. See you in 2 weeks. So it's just a little bit slower and can be frustrating at the beginning. So weekly.
Okay. And then how can you assess progress and success in therapy? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. I mean, it looks different for everybody. But I would say, yeah, it just depends on your goals, Like if you're kind of like, okay, I want to be decreasing my anxious thoughts, is that happening? Are things starting to feel a little bit better? For some people, they do just need a place to process what's going on. I mean, with a lot of the artists that I work with, I can't tell you how much we'll talk about even just like persona and social media and how that affects an individual. That is so hard. And I can't stress that enough of being an artist, being a songwriter, that is hard. That is just like a very hard thing to do, to have to be vulnerable with so many strangers. So be kind to yourselves and know that, like, yeah, it's hard. It's hard and everybody needs help. So yeah.
It is so difficult. And I love that you bring up social media in that aspect, because I think a lot of the times songwriters and as artists, I feel like that has to have all of our attention, even more so than actually creating the music. And that can have a really heavy mental toll. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It is very difficult to be a songwriter right now.
Yeah, it's a huge mental toll, but it is also such a big piece of the job. So it's figuring out like, okay, how do you complete this big part of the job without it crushing you? Because then you can't make good art, and then where does it get you? So yeah, getting ahead of that, I think, is very important.
I love that. What are some things about therapy that people get wrong? Some assumptions.
Let's see. I mean, maybe some assumptions that I've seen is that it's for people that are weak or broken or can't handle their own problems, or, something along those lines, which is not true. I would say the people that come to therapy and are willing to face these hard things in their lives and decide, you know what, like, I don't want to be living like this. I want something better for me. That takes all of the bravery in the world. Like, people that are doing that work, that is not easy. And that is not for the weak. So I would say, nah, that's not true.
I love that. Okay, so what can you do if you're not vibing with a therapist? If you've had a couple of sessions and you're just not feeling understood, or maybe you don't really vibe with their methods, how do you, that could be so awkward. How do you approach that conversation with a therapist?
Yeah. So there's a couple things. One, if you're like, this is not the right vibe, it is more than understandable to find someone else that is the right vibe. Like, it is, I always say this, like, if you feel like this isn't working or whatever, please go wherever you feel good and get help. Like, therapists, for the most part, like, we want to help. So if we're, doing therapy and it's not helping, nobody loves that. Like, nobody's like, yay, I guess it would be a similar thing if you were writing music that you thought was awful and everyone thought was awful, but you just like kept going because you're like, well, I don't want the audience to feel bad, like, no, just like switch it up. That's totally fine. I will say it can be very therapeutic to have those confrontations. And while that is terrifying, I think it can be really helpful to be like, okay, what about this isn't working for me? Like, is it, this person, which it very much can be? Is it that they're asking me questions that are really uncomfortable and hard for me to answer? Maybe. And really like searching within yourself as to like, okay, why have I come to this conclusion? But yeah, sometimes not everybody is everyone's cup of tea, and that is fine. But I will say, yeah, search within yourself, figure out more so like, am I looking for something different? Because that can happen too, of like, you could be really struggling with anxiety, and then, that starts to get better, and then something else pops up, and there's a therapist that specializes in that something else. So, and that's totally, all of that is okay.
I love that. Give yourself permission to let go and admit that this is not working out for me. I love that.
Yeah.
That can be really difficult. So thank you so much for walking us through that.
Confrontation and uncomfortable situations are so hard for so many people.
Yes.
So yeah, be kind to yourself in that, but know that you're going to find, like just keep going. It's okay.
A question that we did have about therapy is, how confidential is therapy, and what are the limits to that confidentiality?
Yeah. So with therapy, so therapists are all operate under HIPAA, which is the same, doctors, like same medical rules. Everything is confidential. The times that confidentiality needs to be broken is when you're hurting yourself, someone's hurting you. But there's also like some limits within that, right? Okay. So if there is like active suicidality, there's a plan, there's a means of doing it. All of that's when confidentiality needs to be broken. If you're planning on hurting somebody else, there's a plan, there's all of these things. That's when confidentiality needs to be broken. It's all about safety. It's keeping you safe. It's, keeping generally people safe. If somebody is hurting you, it depends on age. Like it is a different conversation, like domestic violence versus child abuse. Those are two different things. If there's child abuse going on, therapists have to report. Again, it's about safety. So those are kind of the limits, and everything else lands in that confidential umbrella. I have like releases of information. I work with my clients, like if they have a psychiatrist, if they have a past therapist, doctors, things like that. I need a release in order to even talk to anybody. If somebody called me and was like, "Oh, is Tara your client?" Right. I didn't have a release. I'd be like, "Tara, who?" I don't know,
Tara. Okay, so that all makes sense. So another question that we had was about kind of cultural considerations in therapy, and why that's important.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is a huge piece of all like therapists' work. All the education is about having that cultural competency. Everybody, people are shaped by their communities, where they come from, the families that they come from. So it is a therapist's job to have an understanding of that. And it's not to say like everybody's journey is different. It's not like, oh, you come from this background, therefore this and this is going to be true to you. Right. But I think having those cultural awarenesses as to, what, like how that might shape somebody and how they view things. So yeah, I think that is super important. And if that, like, absolutely bring that up on consultation calls too, of if you're feeling like, okay, this is a really important piece to me that I want to be talking about, feel free to talk with the therapist about that on the consultation call from the get-go. And it's not to say that you need to say, like, be like, hey, this is important to me. The therapist should be factoring that in.
Okay, I love that because
Yeah.
I've had personal experiences with therapists who I just felt there was just too much of a gap in maybe lived experience, or, I'm queer, for instance. So finding someone who either specializes, in LGBTQ therapy, or at least is open to that, obviously, is important. But that's awesome. I love that. Like, have that conversation in the consultation call and kind of see if this therapist, again, that's another way to decipher whether or not a therapist is right for you. I love that.
Yeah.
Virtual therapy.
Yes.
Are there pros and cons to virtual therapy? I know that, obviously after the pandemic, and during the pandemic, obviously, I guess maybe we're still in it, who knows? But right, virtual therapy became very popular and as an important option for folks. Are there pros and cons to that?
Yeah. I mean, I think the pros are that it makes it more accessible to a lot of people. And that, yeah, it does just, if you're already working from home or you want to do therapy, but in the middle of the day, it's a bit easier to like go onto your computer than to be like, hold on, I need to drive, in LA 45 minutes, regardless of where you're going, and
Right.
to and from and whatnot. So I think that can be really helpful. Also, for some people, they feel really comfortable in their homes, like that's their safe space. They can kind of have their like whatever their comfort items are, and whether that's like wearing sweatpants or have like a stuffed animal or whatever that is, you can have that. So I think those are some of the benefits of virtual. But in person, there is also, like just like having a phone conversation in person or over the phone, it is just different. Like there is a different energy. So I think that both are great. Whatever works for you, do that. I also like some therapists will offer both. Like I do both. And I'm also happy to be like, yeah, if you want to come in person and then switch it up and do virtual, because I have a lot of clients that have songwriting sessions and, like have a lot of different things going on. So I really try to be flexible to meet the needs of that community. So
I think that's so great, especially the accessibility aspect is so important, especially with songwriters and artists and musicians, just having that ability if you're on the road, being able to kind of tap in with your therapist and make sure that you're still getting the help you need despite the distance.
Yeah.
How can someone make the most out of their therapy sessions? Like you were saying, homework. I love that. I'm really, really into the idea of having something tangible after a session. But what would you say folks can do to kind of, go beyond just that 1 hour session?
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple different things. It's like, really taking note of what, like even tracking your own goals, coming in with goals and being like, okay, I want to be working on these things. How do I do that? And maybe even that goal will be like setting a goal. that's its own thing, So having goals, working towards those. But like really knowing that it is not just 1 hour a week. It is those baby steps that are really hard and can be really annoying to be thinking in a different way. Like I do really understand how hard that work is. But treating it as in a like, okay, this is like a treatment. Like I am doing this. It's not that I'm just doing this 1 hour a week. And then also there are other resources. There's groups like Backline. You guys have amazing groups. And that can also be really cost effective too. If it's something like, okay, I can't afford therapy every week, or I can only do therapy for this amount of time. Groups can be a cost-effective way to still be getting that like accountability and the support that you need. But just continuing that work in between sessions, I think, is the most important piece.
I want to pivot since, we have about 10 more minutes. You are also a coach.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd love to kind of talk about the differences between therapy, which we all just went over,
Mm-hmm.
versus life coaching. What does that entail? How is it different? And how do you know what is right for you?
Yeah. So therapy and life coaching, different beasts, I guess. Therapy is really more so, let's start with life coaching. Life coaching is very goal oriented and more directive. That one can be more like, I would say with my life coaching clients, it is like a lot of like, okay, here are goals, here are resources. Not that I don't do that with my therapy clients, but with therapy, it is a bit more like really tapping into the emotions of things, really, doing a bit more reflection on what it is that, I'm hearing. With life coaching, it's like, it's just more directive. Life coaching also can be really helpful just for, people that are feeling stuck. And they're just like, you know what? I'm not feeling, it's not like a depression thing. It's not an anxiety thing. It's just like, I'm having a hard time completing my goals. I'm getting really distracted. I want to be doing X, Y, and Z. What is getting in my way? So it's able to like rework that and be like, okay, these things are maybe the things that are getting in your way. How do we get over those? How do we get you to your goals?
I love that. I thank you so much for breaking that down. That life coaching is more directional, more goal-oriented. Therapy is more reflective, bringing in the emotions and maybe past experiences. And also, I think it's so important, especially as songwriters, like that feeling of feeling stuck is kind of, it's very normal. It happens very often. And so I think for some folks, maybe life coach is more of the avenue. For some that might resonate. So thank you so much for breaking that down.
Yeah.
We have a couple more questions left, and then I believe Ariel's going to come back and kind of talk about a little bit more about the SONA Foundation services. But another question that we had, Amanda, is that what can someone do for a friend who is struggling but doesn't have the insurance or funds to pay for therapy? I guess first off, though, how would you approach someone who is struggling, even, about therapy?
Yeah. Like, struggling with the idea of going to therapy, or just struggling in general?
Struggling with the idea of going to therapy.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I would say that, of course, like you never want to see your friend struggling. I think even having that reflection can sometimes be helpful for people to hear, because, when you're in it, sometimes it doesn't feel like other people see that. So I think having those conversations with friends and open communication, I think, is super important. And just allowing, that friend, if you're like, wow, they could benefit from therapy. It's something that they have to really decide, like at the end of the day, they need to be ready for that. So even if you can see that they should be ready for that, sometimes it just takes a minute for people to get there. So I think by just being as supportive as you can as a friend, being like, I hear you, I see you, how can I help you? What resources can I get to you that would be helpful? And then, like calling up Backline, looking at, like Music Industry Therapist Collective, all of these things, I mean, I've had friends reach out to me and be like, my friend, he needs somebody. You seem cool. And I'm like, that's great. Happy to talk with them. But it has got to come from them, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's important. But I think we've all been there of having those friends that you're just like, I want to help. I want to figure out how I can help you. And sometimes being that listening ear is really helpful. Sometimes being that reflective mirror is really helpful.
And I feel, again, like having these types of conversations, helping break that stigma of, therapy is not a scary thing. It can look so different for everyone. It's not the sterile, uh, situation. It can truly be what you need it to be, it sounds like.
Yeah. And there are so many different therapists.
You're right.
Like if you meet with one, you're like, what a weirdo. Find another one.
I think that's where, people really get hung up on is like I know for myself, even for a long time, I had really not so great experience with a therapist, and it really turned me off for years of like wanting to seek help. And I'm so happy that we're having these conversations more and more about like, it's okay if your first therapist didn't work or your second or your third, like you will find the right fit, and you'll know it when you feel that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So I want to just go over, I want to be mindful of your time. And I also want to thank you for this incredibly insightful and informative conversation, and helping us navigate therapy and breaking it all down for us, and not making it this looming, scary subject. But before we go, I want to go over some key takeaways from this conversation for those watching, almost like a checklist, if you will. So maybe let's go through questions to ask your therapist during the consultation call. Is maybe going over insurance, out-of-pocket costs, maybe what their approach is, and also kind of assessing what it is you want to work on yourself.
Yeah.
And then also experience, maybe learning about your therapist's experience and expertise, and then also assessing what your needs are. If you'd like to see, a specialist in something, or with a background or coming from the same community as you, sometimes can really help bridge that gap in understanding. And so I just want to thank you so much, Amanda, for all of your help. And we're going to have this living on YouTube so that folks can go back and listen back and take some notes. Thank you so much for all of your help in this.
Of course. I hope that was helpful and clear and not overwhelming. I know it's a lot of information. So yeah, if ever, you or anybody has questions, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to answer them, because at the end of the day, I really am so passionate about the music community gaining better mental health care, gaining access, like taking away that stigma. So I'm always happy to have those conversations.
Real quick, if folks want to reach out to you to see if, they can seek therapy services from yourself or life coaching experience, where can they find you?
Yeah, they can I'm on Instagram or my website, amandawheelerwellness.com. Or I also am on, as I had mentioned, Music Industry Therapist Collective. I'm on there as well. I'm around. Just
awesome.
Type me into Google.
Yes, and Ariel actually just threw in Amanda's website in the chat. So if you're interested in checking out Amanda for therapy or life coaching services, please go to that website. Amanda, thank you so much again.
Of course. Amanda, thank you for having me. Of course. Happy to do it.
Tara, that was a great conversation.
Oh, thank you so much. Truly, these are the highlights of my month. So
Yeah.
I hope that was helpful for folks. I hope it helps break down some of the, heavier questions or heady questions about therapy. And, there are so many resources out there for songwriters, for artists. Whether you have insurance or if you don't, you still can access therapy. And I think that's the biggest thing. The biggest takeaway is that, like, you can get the help that you need.
Yeah, 100%. And Backline offers a lot of resources. And on the SONA Foundation website, sonafoundation.com, we have a link to Backline. So folks can find you guys there, plus some other resources on our mental health resource page. But I feel, 20 years ago when I was starting out touring as a songwriter, I didn't like the idea of being able to access therapy or have mental health support specifically from corners of the music industry, people who understood what it was to be a touring artist. It never even crossed my mind that those resources would be out there. And they might not have been out there 20 years ago, but when I think about the work that you guys are doing over at Backline.care and that we're doing over at SONA Foundation, it just lifts my heart as a songwriter, right? And you're also a performing songwriter, so it's like, we're working, both you and I are working in that intersection right there.
I mean, I think it's just so important. I mean, I've been in the industry for 15 plus years, and for a really long time, I didn't even think it was okay to even think about my mental health. Like,
That's right.
we live in a society where there's such stigma still, but especially back then when we were first starting out in the industry, it was just kind of like, deal with it, deal with all of the struggles yourself and internalize. And, it was considered weak to talk about. And I'm just so excited to see that stigma is slowly getting broken down. And we're starting to see resources like the SONA Foundation, like Backline pop up and really provide that care for songwriters and artists, for those that really need it the most.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's always been that, there's so many stereotypes about what it means to be an artist. And,
Mhm.
just thinking about how it almost feels at times, it has in the past before, Backline and SONA Foundation and these kinds of conversations, it felt almost like, well, if you're choosing to live the life of an artist, you've got to suffer the consequences. And one of those consequences is going to be that you don't receive mental health support, and that, those things are entwined, integral to being an artist. And that's not true. It doesn't have to be, tied together. And we do now have the support that everybody else everybody else
Right.
has. And I want to say something about the conversation with Amanda that I really appreciated, especially that consult call that you guys were talking
Mm.
about. What are the questions to ask in that call? What are the modalities, and is the therapist one that works within systems, the family system, and reflecting back on past history, or are they more focused, with the CBT and the sensory experience of the moment, how to get present. And that was an incredibly helpful part of your conversation today. Thank you for that.
I mean, I just think it's so important because, I think folks, when you hear the word therapy, a lot of folks still think of just this one type of sitting down on a couch or laying down on a couch talking to someone. And that very well is or can be that the situation, but there are so many different modalities. And so if, talk therapy it doesn't really resonate with you, or if that's not something you feel fully comfortable with, or if you've done it and you'd like to try something new, there is CBT, there is DBT. It's really exciting that there are just these different ways, and you could kind of just try and see what fits and what works for your life and what resonates the most.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Well, next month we're going to have another conversation about some other corner of mental health and songwriters. And I love the specificity that we're always having guest songwriters on this show. It's really these conversations could be, mental health for financial advisors, really that they're pertinent to every corner, but to specifically have them for our community is really great. So for those who are watching, more details about next month's topic and guests to be determined, or to be announced, I should say, TBA. But Tara Lopez, you are going to be once again hosting and moderating that conversation. So thank you so much for your care every month with these. Really enjoy it.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored. And there was a question, how can we get a copy of this stream for review? And it'll be on YouTube. So yeah, so feel free to share it with all of your friends, take notes, and we'll also have some resources on YouTube as well. So
absolutely. Great.
Thank you so much, Ariel. This was awesome.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you all for listening. And if you are not already on the SONA Foundation mailing list, please make sure that you are, so that we can let you know the details about next month's Fireside Chat with Backline, and also some of the other programs that we have coming up. We have our third session of our Music and Money event coming up in March, and those details are going to be announced really soon. This is an in-person event in Los Angeles, and also we have a great videography crew that comes in to make sure that the whole panel, all of the discussions, plus some of the B-roll gets captured for, those folks who are not able to be in the room, whether it's because you live elsewhere, or, who knows what. So there's that. And then also we've just recently unveiled a new feature for our newsletter. You can write in anytime and ask your questions about your own career, and some of the wonderful award-winning songwriters who serve on our board of directors, they are looking at those questions and doing their best to give mindful, thoughtful, real lived experience answers. So we look forward to staying in touch with you there and then. And let's see, is there anything else? I think that's all. So thank you so much, and be well, and we'll see you next time.